Hello, everybody. I'm Neil Acharya.
And I'm Nate Sager.
Welcome to SportsLit. I don't know about you, but I can say that for myself, the 24-hour news cycle can turn into white noise. It's no different with sports. While the implications of what line Mitch Marner plays on for the Leafs is certainly intriguing to tens of thousands, it might catch my attention briefly before disappearing behind other pressing matters, such as Carey Price's health status and what shirt Lonzo Ball wore to Madison Square Gardens. For years, I found myself searching for more. Almost a decade ago or thereabouts, my co-host, Nate Sager, introduced me to the Best of American Sports Writing, an annual anthology that started publication in 1991. Series editor Glenn Stout and subsequent guest editors bring together what, in their estimation, is the very best in narrative nonfiction involving sport, from bullfighting to baseball. There, I found what I was looking for, and what I believe is at the root of a good feature piece and the ESPN 30 for 30 phenomenon. They're popular productions which peel back the layers and go deeper. This fall, award-winning authors Stacey May Fowles and Pasha Malla released the Best Canadian Sports Writing Anthology. Today, myself and Nate will chat with Stacey about her motivations for the project and much more. Nate, what do you think about the book?
Well, I just sort of have to start off with, I guess, I had to go break down some of my preconceived notions about what a book would be, because it was kind of like, okay, how Canadian is this going to be? How is it going to differentiate itself from the Best American Sports Writing series? And I was, and I'd heard, mixed things. So there's always a couple people. No one's going to like when they put these things out, no one's going to like every piece. But I really felt like, okay, this is an essential that you should have if you're a fan of sports and a fan of good writing in general, because there were so many times I was surprised by what I really liked. There's a piece in there by Richard Benker about being a cricket fan in Canada. I know nothing about cricket, and yet I was totally enthralled by it, because he described the experience of what it's like when you live in Canada and your favorite sport is one that's not played on ice.
Right.
So I really did enjoy it. I remember, I'm just coming at it from the perspective of, I was maybe a little dubious of it at first, because I was just kind of like, this has been done. I didn't think we had that much depth in Canada because
the population is much. Yeah, we're 30 of American sports writing. The population size.
Yeah, we're drawing on 35 million people, and this is obviously an English language publication. So you got to take Quebec and large pockets of Canada get taken out of the mix, but it's not trying to be definitive. It's just saying this is a really good cross section of writing, and to me that's where it worked, was that it had the cross, it had the strength, and it had the depth and the width and the breadth and everything.
What I think certainly what struck me is, this is our third episode, and the first two episodes we had books that were hockey books, and you pretty much had to be a hockey fan to appreciate it. And in this book, I think you can see the art in it. Great writing is great writing, whether you're writing about ballet or the rodeo.
There's a piece in there about ski ballet, which is something like by Eva Holland, and it's
excellent.
Yeah, and I just had this vaguest little mental picture of that being a demonstration sport at the 1988 Calgary Olympics, and be like, what the hell is this? And it's the sport that actually had a World Cup circuit and disappeared, and it got basically taken over by snowboarding and moguls and slopestyle and all that.
These pieces, they really force you to, not force you, but they invite you. They invite you to think, and the art behind narrative nonfiction is certainly evident in many of the pieces, and that's what I love about it, and that's what I loved about Best of American Sports Writing. When you first gave it to me, a copy of it, about 10 years ago, it was definitely changed. I certainly found an avenue where I was like, wow, okay, this is more of what I'm interested in. aside from the regular, because I talked about it off the top, the 24-hour news cycle. There's a lot of times where you're going to get stories about the Leafs are perfect with Austin Matthews out of the line. I mean, just stuff like that. Or
there's so much. Yeah, there's just insatiable beast
the latest
to feed,
from Robidoux
right?
Island. And I mean, I'd actually be interested in a piece on the latest from Robidoux Island. I think that actually is kind of intriguing. But you know what I mean.
I haven't
right?
heard that one. Yeah, I know what you mean. It's cursory. It's very
it just goes away very quickly.
It's surface level, right. And it's just sort of meant to fill in. It's like this thing they say about television, right? I mean, the fact they take a break every 7 minutes to show commercials, the unstated messages, nothing matters, and here this is showing, as I think Stacey talks about, that people turn to sports because there's an emotional need to connect with something, and a lot of times that just isn't reflected. It's assumed that this is just a very transactional relationship, and for a lot of people it is, right? I mean,
and which is totally
fine. You've got your fantasy league, you've got your whatnot.
There was a time
we do those too
when the Leafs were making playoff runs, probably 93. I'd say it's after the 93-94 runs, the ones in the late 90s, the conference finals, 99 and 02, where I would. As soon as the game was done, I would go to TSN and I'd want to watch the post clips from start to finish. It's not so much that the case anymore. I mean, I would much rather just hear about the game.
Yeah, I think when you get a truly great game, you just, as soon as it's over, you just want to click. I have my memories. Yeah, the Will DeNovi piece. That's the second last one in the book about being a film producer, a Canadian living in the States and getting in love with football. And he mentions the famous Boise State Oklahoma game. I remember shutting that off as soon as Boise State scored the winning 2-point conversion, and I missed the running back proposing to his girlfriend.
Yes, well, those are cases sometimes when maybe we should have kept it going, but the bottom line is this. I mean, without rambling any more than we already are, going deeper is fun. And I'm really looking forward to talking to Stacey with you about that kind of area of sport and that area of writing.
Yeah, it's like anything. It's about the people, not the event itself, right? And I think there's sometimes a bias that goes the other way in sports coverage, because you always have the columnist, I've covered 35 Super Bowls, and 16 Olympics, and it's like, well, that's great, but that's not what it's really about, right? It's not about that number.
Yeah, not always. That's for sure. Narrative nonfiction. Let's talk about it. Coming up on SportsLit. All right, welcome back in. I'm here with Nate Sager, and Stacey May Fowles has joined us. We had a debate earlier about how to say your name, and I've heard that we said it correctly.
I always say Stacey May Foulball is the easiest way to remember it.
That makes sense. Of course, the baseball book, which we'll talk about after. But we're here in the Toronto Reference Library, where The Weeknd shot a video.
Yep.
You may be a Weeknd fan.
I am a Weeknd fan.
How can you
And
not?
I am a fan of the library.
Where you can check out Best Canadian Sports Writing. A book compiled by Stacey May Fowles is with us, and Pasha Malla. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
Pasha Malla, that's right.
Pasha Malla. And that's what we're here to talk about, so we'll get right into it. Please explain to us your motivations for compiling this anthology.
I think initially my motivations weren't entirely clear. It was one of those projects that it came together in this amazingly seamless way. Which in publishing is not always the case, right? Publishing can often be clunky and long, and you face a lot of obstacles. But as I said, the day the book launched, I said this project felt like a series of yeses. I'd long been a reader of Best American Sports Writing, and I'd often wondered why we didn't have a Best Canadian version, given that there was so much quality sports writing in this country. And it was sort of like an idle idea I had. I brought it to my agent, and she thought it was a great idea. And we immediately got interest from publishers. When I went to Pasha, I've known Pasha for about probably close to 15 years now. And he sort of has an interest in the sports that I don't have an interest in, so it felt like a good melding. Both of us tend to be a little more literary in our interests, so I think that we approached this project as readers, not necessarily as editors. Obviously we were editors, but it was more what do we enjoy, what is compelling, what is narrative. And we did get interest from some publishers in the end. We went with ECW, and they were on board right away, and off we went. We did a call for submissions, and we also solicited work. And we just sort of tried to just pull together the broadest range of perspectives on sports in Canada. It's an incredible collection, and I was really blessed to work with all the writers that are in the book. It is by no means complete. There's so much great writing happening in this country. A lot of it is happening apart from the mainstream, and I think that's what we wanted to showcase with this book.
Yeah, my question was, once you sort of knew, okay, this is a go, how much did things change in the conception? Like, because it was kind of like, you had the title, and then it was kind of like, okay, but you, as you touched on, you really wanted to like make sure that you got all these different things, so it wasn't like a sound alike, and I think that's great. So I just wondered how much maybe did like priorities or emphasis shift in any way.
I think from the get-go there was some obvious, there's a piece in the book that Stephen Brunt wrote about Roberto Osuna. And I remember, it's a Sportsnet piece, it's a much more mainstream piece, but it was so compelling, and it was sort of one of the starting points for me. It was like, I want to showcase this kind of narrative storytelling. But as we sort of got deeper into it, it was amazing how, working with Pasha, and we complement each other really well in terms of our tastes, but also our working styles. I'm totally surprised by how much wrestling is in the book.
There's actually one of the longest pieces is a wrestling piece.
Yeah.
Let me find the name of that right here. Please continue.
Was that Spencer Gordon? Yeah.
There's a very and it came from Spencer's piece came from a journal, right? A literary journal, right? It didn't.
Getting over.
Yeah. There's a piece on cricket that was in, I believe, Brick magazine.
Yep.
There's sort of unlikely sources. There's a beautiful Hazlitt piece on ice dancing.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. I remember that one too.
I think we sort of started with this idea of, there were some more obvious picks just because that's the kind of stuff that gets the marketing push behind it. That's the stuff that gets the eyeballs on it. But as we started to dig deeper, we found that there's, so many interesting takes on how we interact with sports, how fandom plays into sports, how passion, how our own lives, and it just became just more holistic view than the typical, profile, reportage, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I guess in direct question, what makes sports writing distinctly Canadian? I guess
because there's some instances in here where it's the author might be Canadian and the subject may not be, right?
Yeah.
So how did you guys come up with what you were going to define as Canadian?
Well, we talked about sort of avoiding a nationalism, right? That was really important to us because I think, there are stereotypes about Canada and sports that are very limiting. It's hockey is the obvious,
we were joking, like they had the three C's, the curling, CFL, and the Calgary Stampede. Where are they here?
So I think we just kind of said you had to be Canadian. That was it.
Okay.
But in terms of venues or subject matter, it was about showcasing Canadian writers more than it was about a typically Canadian sports writing. And I often think when I'm talking about this book, best is kind of a misnomer in a way. Obviously I think that this is the greatest sports writing in this country, but this idea of best can be very limiting, right? That like whose idea of best and who is the arbiter of taste, and we often, when we say best, it's very limiting, right? So what we were trying to do is something more expansive, that opened people up to new ideas rather than being like, this is a strict list of what qualifies as good in this country.
Right. So if Wright Thompson wrote a story about something that happened in Halifax, it was a sporting event, he would not be able to count. He would not qualify to be in this book, right? You have to be a Canadian writer.
That was sort of our only prerequisite,
right.
Yeah. We also had sort of a wide time limit on it. We started with a calendar year,
right?
But we were finding that things were falling outside of that particular calendar year, so we actually stripped the time limit away from it. So,
and I assume that. Well, I lost my train of thought. I was going to say something about. Did you find? I'm going to skip ahead. I actually forgot my line there. I'm going to skip ahead to the second part of what I was going to ask you. I believe, and I'm trying to get back to grade 11 English. Margaret Atwood had said something like geography has a huge play in Canadian literature.
Yeah.
As I'm sure it does in a lot of other countries' fiction, or non-fiction. But did you feel like there was a geographical element? Like when I was reading this and I'm reading about Whale Cove and I'm reading about...
Yeah, and I find that some of the pieces that stood out for me when I read them initially were pieces about places and how sports... not so much geography, but how sports is a unifying factor in isolated communities, places that are not so connected to a huge stadium or a huge team, or it's more about how sports connects people in smaller places, right? So there's a beautiful piece piece about a basketball league in the north, right?
Right.
Yeah, that was a very... I loved it.
And it's such a human story, and I think it's a story that doesn't get told a lot in the daily beat writing and the daily, who's getting traded where and that sort of... about how sports is very healing. There's a beautiful storyline about how a convenience store owner gets involved in the basketball league because it helps him with depression, and those are the sort of storylines that I'm particularly interested in, as you may know. But there are also ones that are not showcased as much as these sort of big profiles, star-studded kind of accessy kind of things. But that's not to say that the more high-profile stuff isn't as valuable, right? There's Eric Corrine wrote a beautiful piece
on Chuck Hayes.
Yeah, and that was it was so personal, and it was sort of revealing in a way that didn't feel exploitive, and there's so many different ways to approach it, and I don't think that we were disposing of a certain kind of sports writing. We were just trying to open up what sports writing could be.
The story you were talking about regarding the basketball league in Canada's frozen north was called Home Court by Sam Riches, about Filipino hoops up there. So it had that cultural element. A lot of people probably wouldn't know that this is going on had they not read this.
No, and it's such a beautiful piece. It's so well told.
Is that why you opened with it? Like, how did that work?
I did.
Did you choose? How did you choose the order?
It was just really nuts and bolts. Like, I took a first crack at it, and then it was in an Excel document, and then and what we tried to do is sort of instead of doing it in this kind of, well, all of these sports pieces of a certain type are together, or all of these sports pieces of a certain sport were together, we tried to sort of make it ebb and flow a little bit. So, here's hockey, here's football, here's wrestling again.
Right.
There's so much wrestling. But also the
Which
approach.
surprised you?
Because there was opinion pieces, and there's, straight up reporting, and we tried to make it as mixed up as possible. We started on a narrative note and we ended on a narrative note. So,
A, were you surprised by how much wrestling was in it? B, in terms of the dates, and that's the question I forgot to ask you before I went into that whole Margaret Atwood geography thing. you kept the dates open. You talked about this initially. It was going to be a year or something.
Yeah,
like
it was 2016 was the initial year.
And that's obviously because this is the first edition. It has. I mean, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, the hope is that we're going to do more.
And then will the window then be in that calendar year?
It'll be post whatever the last piece
Right.
So buy it so there can be more. That's my plug. Because I mean, these things are. I mean, the reality in Canada, there's anthologies don't do that well. This is ECW is taking a bit of a risk on this book because it's a new thing. There hasn't been a lot of attempts to collect great sports writing in this country. When you're writing a book proposal, you sort of look and see where it's happened before, and we weren't finding a ton of examples. I think there was one in the 90s, and
okay.
There was one in the 2000s, I think, called The Way It Looks From Here, but it was very much newspaper oriented and.
And I mean, there was some talk early on in the process, like, let's make this a Canada 150 thing, and we were kind of resistant to that.
Thank you for not doing that.
But I think what we want to do is do it every year, and it's not necessarily a project that's about. It's a project that's about showcasing the amazing things that are happening in this country. It's not so much this, as I said before, this limiting kind of list that happens annually where it's like, well, this is the best of the best, and which I think is what kind of happens with these things is, there's an exclusionary list that gets produced, and but if you look at the book, you'll be amazed at the range of stuff and the range of perspectives. And Pasha said this great thing, and I'm paraphrasing him, but he said some of the most compelling pieces in the book were about sports I don't care about, because writers have this ability to sort of introduce you to, like there's a street racing piece,
and Morgan Campbell,
and
Toronto Star.
And I would have previously said I didn't care about street racing, but he'd done this amazing piece that sort of revealed this underground street racing. In Toronto, and I was just totally enthralled by it, and I think Pasha's absolutely right. It's, people often say, I'm not interested in X sport, so I'm not going to read that, whereas this book sort of like explodes that notion.
Right, and I mean that's real, the art behind it, right? They can make you care about something you wouldn't otherwise really care about, right?
It feels so good to freely brag about a book, because I didn't write the actual pieces of it. I'm like, it's so good, you should buy it right now.
Well, sometimes it's easier to...
Well, I was kind of interested, like, what was the process like in just getting down to, I think, the 38 selections? I just when I was thinking of, like, the two of you working together, and I was like, this must be like when life partners are trying to decide what to name their child or something. Like,
I mean, I think in any circumstance where you sort of take on a partner on a project, it can be a bit scary because
SportsLit with Nate Sager and Acharya.
Who knows?
Sorry, right? Continue.
And I mean, I've known Pasha long enough to know that I like him, but I've never really had. It's interesting because we met because we worked together at a literary journal many years ago, now defunct literary journal. So that's how we actually initially met.
You can say the name.
Descant was the name of the literary journal, and we've since gone on to publish books, and he is incredibly successful in his literary career, and so it was sort of nice to reunite with him on a project. But you don't know how it's gonna be. Like it is like a date, right? And it actually amazed me how easy it was, because we sort of fit together, like puzzle pieces in terms of what we were interested in, and there were some pieces that I may not have picked, and pieces that he may not have picked, but in the end. When we had a final conversation about the contents of the book, it was sort of this, we had been able to show each other the value of set pieces, and the book was so much better for his work on it, absolutely.
Is part of the sales pitch for this book that, you could we talked about you might not be interested in a particular sport, but you could find this story captivating. So does this go beyond a sports audience too, in terms of sales and who this could reach and who would be interested?
I think so, and I say that as a person that felt really excluded from sports fandom and sports culture for a really long time, which I read about in my other book.
Oh, is that this book that just happens to be here called Baseball Life Advice?
That book, yeah. And I think that part of the reason for doing this project at Best Canadian Sports Writing is to invite people into sports culture in a way that. It can be a really limiting environment and a really uncomfortable environment for people. And I think everybody, I'm married to somebody who doesn't like sports, so I totally understand how it can. How
did that ever happen?
It just happened. But it can be a very unattractive environment for some people, and I'm totally empathetic to that because I spent a good decade away from it. But I think that this book is sort of an invitation in a lot of ways because it's very human. I think somebody said there's a quote from a review about how it's a very human book. It's a book about being alive or something. I'm paraphrasing completely, but it's definitely not about stats and scores. It's
Sure.
about the human experience of sports.
Off the top, Nate, we talked about the best of American sports writing, and you talked about kind of building upon that for this. So, explain the influence of BASW on this.
Well, it's been around for a long time. I can't quote you how many years, but it's
1991.
Yeah, that first one was 1991.
Thank you.
Me and Nate are both. Actually, Nate put me on to Best of American Sports Writing about 10 years ago. Bought me a book, and I was like, this is what I've been waiting for.
It's the kind of thing like I've bought my dad for Christmas. It's a very sort of it's a annual tradition.
Yes.
And so obviously the influence was there immediately. And the question, like, why don't we have one of these?
Right.
It makes no sense. And also, like, the sports community in the U.S. and the American version is open to Canadian writers,
Yes.
which is an interesting.
One of us here may have submitted something in the recent...
Two of us might have.
Two of us. Nate, are you in this group too? Have you submitted anything to...
I don't like to... I didn't
Just saying.
I think it was the 2005 book. I was like a notable...
There you go.
Page 322 with my name misspelled, but
it's quite a prestigious thing, right? And the writing community, every year it comes out, and everybody tweets that they're in it or who's in it. But it has, and I don't want to get too into this aspect of things, but it has had its criticisms, right? Because it has a tendency to be very one note in terms of who it includes, and that's a reflection of sports writing in general in North America. That it's it is the domain of white straight men. That's kind of there's a bit of a chicken and egg thing happening there, like what gets published, what gets included. So I think Pasha and I felt like it was really important to think about that going into this book.
Well, that's one of the major ways I saw it deviate, obviously. And I mean, if you look at the submission guide, and I'm going to read it, not guide, but I guess the on the website explains right from the outset. Where is it? Okay, we prioritize inclusivity and strongly encourage writers of all backgrounds and identities to submit their best sports writing, especially those who have traditionally been excluded from the mainstream sports conversation. So that's the one major way it deviates from the best of American sports writing.
And just to piggyback on Neil's point, I think, and your point too, Stacey, I think I looked up I think it was like the best American sports writing from 20 years ago, so like 1997, and 20 of the 21 pieces were by men.
Yeah.
And the other one was like a long form newspaper piece by Linda Robertson, who wrote for the Miami Herald. So
yeah, and I often say that for whatever reason the realm of sports writing is so much slower than every other realm. Like it doesn't it doesn't seem to catch up to the demands for diversity that every other genre of writing seems to have. Like, it seems perfectly acceptable for Sportsnet to put up that photo of their deepest roster of experts,
right,
and it's like 27 white men. You know? Just...
The other way it deviates major way is I feel like I don't think I've seen multiple authors published in a single piece, or single, I guess, edition of Best of American Sports Writing. But here, for example, Sarah Kerchak has three.
Yeah, I mean, part
pieces.
of the reason we did that with Sarah's work is that we discussed it, and her pieces are quite short.
Right.
So she deals a great deal with disability in the realm of sports, specifically autism.
Right.
So we felt it was important. Her writing for Vice was, she would write these shorter, well-argued pieces, and we thought, well, why don't we do a suite of her work? So that's part of the reason why we did that, just to be able to, because we had sort of an idea of word count, and we really wanted to showcase the range of work that she was doing. So, and her work just kind of blew me away in terms of, I mean, she has these incredibly well-reasoned, thoughtful arguments, and she's she can convey them in such a short space.
Mm-hmm. Hemingway.
And it kind of felt like a shame to sort of limit it to just one of her pieces, right? So we collected up 3 that we liked and put them together.
Did anything get, because of the kind of what we talked about and the inclusivity and kind of looking kind of outside the lines, I'd say, did anything get left out, you felt, because you had to, you were kind of aiming for that? Was there
No, I don't think so.
No.
I nothing notable comes to mind.
Right.
I think that I think the really interesting thing was that we opened it up to submissions, and this is something that editors say time and time again, was that the submissions were primarily white men.
Okay.
And so we solicited a great deal of the work because the inbox was consistently full of and I mean it was great work, but it just wasn't what we were looking for.
Right.
And I mean, people often say this in publishing, that like the degree of confidence that goes into like a white man submitting his work and the reluctance of other people to submit their work, it was, it's a thing that people say time and time again, that, please send your work. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, like, a great deal of this book has been solicited, and we, when we found Sarah's work, for example, it was like, oh, this is so amazing, but she didn't send it to us.
Right.
We found it, right? So
yeah. If you were percentage-wise, if you were ballparking, like, what percentage of the pieces in the book were solicited?
I would say it was over 50%.
Wow.
Definitely. Yeah. But I mean, that's normal. Okay. I think that, like, busy freelance writers are busy freelance writers, so they're trying to make a living rather than submitting work, right? And it was the first year, so it wasn't that high profile, and but yeah, I mean, it was an interesting process in terms of seeing what came in the inbox and what we had to solicit.
So did those 2 caveats we talked about in terms of like the inclusivity and then the multiple entries, did that also help separate this in a way from Best of American Sports Writing, in the sense that we would have something just that's different? Like, it's not just the Canadian version. I mean, or maybe you've answered that already.
There's something in the introduction where Pasha talks about, like, how it's important not to sort of little brother ourselves and be like, well, how do we compare to the American version? So I'm going to stop you right there.
Am I comparing us to? Okay, all right, fair enough. Nate, question 4.
No, question 4.
Question 4.
Yeah, we had numbered questions.
Am I rambling?
No, we did kind of talk about that, and we have. I think we're actually on 6. I guess. 6?
We're on 6. Hold on. Oh no, hold on. I'm gonna go here. We're going to question 5 now. Okay, so
we tend to get all over the place, so we have to organize ourselves.
I love it.
Yeah, there was a lot of rambling last time, so we said we had our powwow today. We were in the war room. We typed everything out on Google Docs. So, we talked about specific pieces, and the ones that jumped out to me were home court, which we talked about the Filipino Basketball League in the Yukon.
I can't shut up about that piece. I just love it so much.
Started the anthology, as we said. Dan Robson's piece, The Boys from Whale Cove.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
A hockey team from the northwest coast of Hudson Bay, and how they go to the big city and experience life, and that was also a great one. Two-part question. Nate loves two-part questions. We already talked about that today, which usually means the person's going to answer the first part and then forget your second question. You have to ask it again.
Yeah.
But what were some of your favorites? Can you pick one? Is this hard? It's like picking one of your children, like picking a favorite finger?
It's interesting because you're sort of wearing two hats, right? You are a human, you are a reader, you are a fan of sports, and then also you're an editor creating a book, right? So there's two different perspectives. Like emotionally, I was a big fan of Shannon Proudfoot's piece, long-time listener, first-time caller.
Oh, that was great. Yeah.
And I think that's because I listen to a lot of baseball talk radio.
Oh yeah.
I don't
Mike
know
Wilner.
why. I listen to a lot of Mike Wilner, and I don't actually know why I do that. People say it's bad for me.
By the way, are the Blue Jays going to trade their first-round pick for a left-handed specialist? I think they should.
I see that when she walked in, like she's like our insider, isn't she?
I'm imitating like the typical Jays talk caller.
Point in the podcast to find out the answer. So now that you've said it, Stacey.
I'm going to ignore that.
Okay.
Exactly. I hope so. I'm glad you did.
I mean, for me, that piece was sort of it was like an insightful look into something that it dominates the sports conversation, but we don't talk about. Like, just the weirdness of talk radio and call-in and this idea that there are people who, like, sit there and wait till the end of a game that has demoralized them and then call in, and it's a form of therapy for people. It was just a fascinating piece.
Didn't they say, and the one of the key points in that is like having a winning team makes for bad talk radio, right? If you're a bad team,
the callers that lose their nerve too. Like,
and there's a caller that developed his own personality, or some kind of, he was known to call in, like Vito from Woodbridge, but he was in Edmonton. I forget what his name was, but that was a great piece. So, what's the tie that binds these great pieces of narrative nonfiction? I guess is the right word, right, Nate?
Narrative nonfiction, or.
What's the tie that binds?
Just that they're good. Like, and that's such a weird word, because what does that mean, right? What is the criteria for good? What is the criteria for goodness? Now we're sort of.
Does it make you feel a certain way?
Now we're in a moral philosophy class. I feel like it was just things that were moving and well crafted, and it shifted from, like, you'll notice if you read the book that the styles are very diverse. There's pieces that are, straight up opinion pieces, and then Catherine Laidlaw's piece about the mountain climber. It is classic, beautiful literary magazine writing. It's just so. I think it's sort of award-winning magazine writing, and then there's a piece about how the Knicks are like the surface of the sun.
Yeah, so, that was interesting.
It is very much. It's about being compelling, and that definition can shift from piece to piece for sure. And I think that was the most important thing to us, that there wasn't a template for what good meant. And that a broad range of readers could read a broad range of writers and be compelled.
We're in the age of the proliferation of media. Obviously, the 24/7 news cycle's been around for decades now. Where does long form fit in that? In that whole spectrum. I mean, to me, and I mean, we're not really here to hear what I think. We're here to hear what you think, but. I mean, I feel like there's like when you see something like 30 for 30 and some of these great feature video pieces, I mean, the roots, for example, Christina Rutherford's piece on Harrison Brown is in here, which I think started that whole conversation, and people started finding out more about it through features. Where is long form, and is it the root of some of these great pieces we see in terms of visual pieces as well?
I think there's sort of this myth. I mean, I have a background in in magazine circulation and publishing marketing, which is an interesting sort of curse because I can see what publications are doing and I can get upset by it, this like pivot to video stuff and how everything is like hot takes and clickbait and this idea that we're going to build a publication around what people will there was a piece going around yesterday about a pitcher with an injury, and and the headline was so not reflective of the actual story. Like he was okay. Probably. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think that there is this hunger now to sort of step away from this, social media churn of 500 word pieces or 600 word pieces. Right. And have a luxurious, insightful, thoughtful, beautiful read. Yes. Whether or not that will survive, that it's hard to say. But I think humans are hungering for it.
Does clickbait and all this crap that's out there really, though, almost feed this? Because it's like there's a greater need now than ever to actually have some substance. Maybe not a greater need more than ever, but there's certainly, when you're seeing some of the clickbait crap, at least I go, wow, I'd really love to go deeper.
Well, I think there's a greater emotional need. Whether or not there's a greater need that will be paid for is the issue, right? Sure. So, I think that's the thing that we're facing. Readers no longer believe they have to pay for writing, right, which is a huge problem, which is started years and years ago. It's not a new phenomenon that readers believe this. As soon as you start getting $9.99 magazine subscriptions, that's when it was over, because that doesn't pay for great writing, right? Advertisers pay for the writing, which is, don't even get me started on this.
So maybe Google and Facebook will start a nice long form magazine.
That's scary. It's a scary idea. But I think there is a really nice opportunity to celebrate this kind of writing, and I think that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to say, there is an opportunity. There is a lot of work online that is beautiful and thoughtful and well crafted, and the internet has actually had a very opening up effect. It's less gatekeepy. It's less limiting. It's not the networks. It's not always Sportsnet all the time. Right. Not that there's anything wrong with Sportsnet, but there are some things wrong with Sportsnet, but a lot of great writing comes out of Sportsnet. But it's not the only thing, right? So
is that because they have the magazine? And TSN doesn't have a magazine.
Sportsnet no longer has the magazine.
But is it because they had the magazine that maybe there was some? Do you feel like the quality of writing? Is there discernible quality?
I would argue that yes, the magazine did have a lot to do with their investment in great long form sports writing. Right. Absolutely, and that has carried over online for sure. But I think it's important that Sportsnet, like any publication, has a mission, and I think that it's important to keep other publications with other missions alive.
Well said, Nate.
Yeah, just to expand on what you said about filling that emotional need, because I was sort of, while preparing for this, I sort of asked one of my colleagues at work about baseball life advice, and she just lit up. Oh. And she was just like, "Oh my goodness, this book made me a baseball fan." It was nice. It was so, she's like, I didn't understand anything about the sport until someone sort of came along and started to add some depth and breadth to who these people are, without I guess talking down to them, or without doing what most baseball broadcasts do, which is hit you over the head with 10 pounds of cherry pick statistics, right? Yeah. I don't know where I was going, but I guess I sort of did want to sort of pivot into something because one of your
go ahead. Yeah, I think this is where we're going to talk about your background too, because we haven't really talked about
that's where I was going,
where you where you started and what you're all about. We focused on the book, but please tell us about yourself.
Oh yeah, no. It's interesting to this whole idea that I'm the editor of Best Canadian Sports Writing, because I think that both Pasha and myself not to diminish Pasha's achievements, because he's incredible. But I think we both came at this project as people who love great writing and love sports. Like, we're not in any way people who are experts, right? We're people that want to celebrate great sports writing, and part of the reason for that is that we love it, right? So this book came from a place of love, and I'm an incredibly passionate sports fan, primarily an incredibly passionate baseball fan. I would say like 98% baseball fan. Are you gonna read something?
Well, I mean, you're also an award-winning novelist, journalist, and essayist. Written about sports for the Globe and Mail, the Walrus, Torontoist, and the National Post, Deadspin, Hazlitt, Vice Sports, and a book. So, I mean, I thought you were going to tell us a little bit about that, too. Don't be modest. Remember, Nate tried false modesty earlier. We want some, now we got some real modesty. Please.
But I've always sort of, in my sports writing, which I was primarily an arts and culture writer, in terms of my journalism and my essays, and I moved into sports writing in 2011, 2012, around that time. And I was always very transparent about my lack of bias, right? I wrote from the perspective, as they say, wrote from the stands. Mm-hmm. Mostly because I didn't have access at the time, but I would, I'm very passionate about sports, and I'm very passionate about people feeling included in sports culture. And so I think I came at this Best Canadian Sports Writing Project from that perspective, instead of sort of while I've done editing projects in the past, I think I came at it from a raw promoter of sports and sports culture and sports community and sports writing, rather than some sort of editor-in-chief kind of person would. I've been writing about baseball primarily since about 2012, and part of that has been writing a newsletter called Baseball Life Advice, which eventually turned into a book deal and is now a book. So that's sort of my most recent personal project.
Yeah. What? Now, going way back, like when you were young, like what made you a Blue Jays fan?
Well,
we're all about the same age, so I'm always eager to hear.
Yeah. So my baseball story is that my dad took me to games. My dad is a British immigrant. Immigrated to Canada in the late 70s, around the same time the Jays became a team. And he actually played basketball in England, and was, a soccer fan, a football fan. And
who did he support?
Liverpool.
Neil is a Liverpool fan, so.
So he moved to Canada with my mother, and baseball was introduced to Toronto and subsequently Canada. And he thought, well, I'll go to baseball games to acclimatize myself to North American culture. Not long after I was born, so I went to baseball games with my dad, which is sort of, very cliche, predictable baseball indoctrination story. So I was sort of in my formative years when the Jays won the World Series. I was, 13, 14 years old. Grew up, went to university, sports became not cool, that thing that happens where you're like, sports aren't cool, I'm into art now. And then around 2011, I was actually diagnosed with depression, and watching the postseason. And I, as the story goes, I found that I really loved, it was actually Justin Verlander.
Yeah, was that the Tigers-Cardinals World Series?
No, it wasn't the World Series. He was pitching in the postseason. Okay. But that was his Cy Young year.
And the year he threw a no-hitter against the Jays.
Yeah. And I was
such a nerd for knowing that.
I just love this thing. And I don't know if either of you have ever been depressed, but when you're depressed, you don't love anything. So this, moment of loving baseball just was sort of transformative for me. So ever since then, I've been writing about how the game has sort of healing properties for people. And the process of writing this book has been amazing in the sense that people have so many of their own stories to tell. They email me, they talk to me at events, and they say, baseball got me through my divorce, it got me through loss, it got me through grief. So that was sort of the impetus for the book. There's more in there, but that was sort of the starting point for it. And it's been really interesting because I've been writing about the game for 6 years and over time I've had increasing access. So I sort of started from this distance and, have since ended up in the clubhouse. And it's sort of been a fascinating experience, especially for somebody who's been writing for so long, to sort of start anew in a new genre and a new field, and be almost a novice again. It's been really fascinating. Like, the last 2 years of my life have just been like, what? Yeah. So it's been really interesting.
And I want to share the one quote you have from, I think the essay is called "Watching Like a Girl."
Yeah.
And it's like, when it is so difficult for them to participate, when they have to work so much harder to be included, why would anyone doubt how much they love it? And I was like, that's perfect. And it made me sort of think about, I've probably been like that with, people who don't know as much about a sport as I do. Like, yeah. So you made me think, man, I can really be a jerk. It's but I will say it's not a gendered thing. It's just me having know-it-all tendencies. But it's kind of funny. I think my sister and I went to a Jays game maybe 7 or 8 years ago, and my sister's husband is Palestinian. Grew up in Jordan and came to Canada in his 20s, and I was trying to explain like basic baseball concepts, but I just kept like overshooting, and finally my sister Trina just had to step in. She's like, "Okay, this is what happens," and like she explained. And by the end, like she was explaining things to Omar better than I ever could. But I just love what you say that, because it's like, I think that really does that really sort of hit on what you're talking about with sports should be inclusive?
Yeah, and I mean, it's the process of promoting baseball life advice has actually been really interesting because, and I haven't talked about it a great deal. But there's been a sort of certain degree of antagonism in the process of promoting the book, where I've actually had moments where I've realized that like somebody is challenging me in the context of doing media, or that like I've literally written a book about baseball and I'm still getting that kind of, I had somebody interviewing me and they were like, well, is there really sexism? And I was like, I can't even believe this is happening. Like it's and looking back over the last 8 months, there was certainly...
This was before Weinstein?
Yes, this was before. But it's just really interesting that this sort of like low-grade antagonism exists, even in the context of writing a book about sexism in sports and being interviewed in a like media context and having somebody be like, "Are you sure? You spent all this time writing this book, and are you sure?" Like, it's, yes, I'm sure. like, and I was asked a question about my opinion on pitchers, and I shared it, and it was an opinion, and it was like, no, I don't think that's, and it's just it's sort of this bizarre, I don't know, like even in you can spend all this time writing this book and have the credentials to talk about a game, and still you will be challenged on your opinions on it. So what are you going to do?
Yeah, that does really seem unfair, because like I say, put in the miles.
And it really is just how sports is weirdly, people like to fight and sort of like, banter sort of turns into this like ceaseless argument, right? Which is very different than a lot of other realms I've existed in. I'm actually surprised, and there's a piece in the book as well about how abusive sports culture can be, and I think I wrongly assumed that it would be fun. Just kind of
is it becoming more fun or less fun?
I mean, it's the same amount of fun, but it is, people can be oddly abusive about your opinions on a player or a team, or it's very bizarre to me. Over what is a game, like literally a game,
right?
Yeah.
And where do people who want to sort of be advocates, what do they need to do to keep pushing forward on that? Because we're definitely at a point in the culture where you can't just stick to sports anymore, but I mean, there's
I want to loop back to best Canadian sports writing on that. I think that it's it's time now to sort of step away from your regular, I'm just going to read the same mainstream content every day. Like, to seek out other voices and other opinions is really important. There's been this great proliferation of podcasts by women, women of color, the people who normally don't have a place in the conversation are creating their own spaces. And I think that, the mainstream sports consumer should be seeking those perspectives out and consuming that media.
And you mentioned, of course, sports talk radio. Like, I'm trying to rack my brain. Is there even, like, on the two stations in Toronto, do either of them have like a regular woman host?
I think doesn't Sherry Ford host?
Does Sherry Ford host on TSN?
I'll have to double check that.
But is there a show with like two women hosting? I feel like that's like something that's really lagged behind.
See, and most of my perspective in the media is baseball. So, Hazel May is basically one of the only women I know who's a sports personality, a baseball personality. There is a Laura Armstrong's at the Star. She's doing beat stuff at the Star, which is great.
The Athletic has made some headway in that regard, have they not?
I'm their only woman baseball writer.
Baseball. I was thinking of for Sanaya does hockey.
Yes, and there are some women who work there as well, but it's still very overwhelmingly male. So
a lot more can be changed. Yes.
I try every time I talk to people. I try to be as optimistic as possible. But yes, a lot can change.
Do you think it will?
I mean, things have changed in the past 5 years that I've been working in sports. So yes, I do think things can change. We saw the Greg Zahn thing that happened recently, that we're having conversations about the environment in sports media. So yeah.
Just to switch gears a little.
Yeah, we feel like we took you down a dark road.
So in terms of
and I always feel like whenever we have these conversations, it's like, let's fix it now, and that's
so let's just have a conversation.
And realistically, that doesn't happen. But it's a kind of a day by day thing, right? Yeah. Just question your own thinking, like question your own assumptions, I guess.
Yeah, and I think people do that. They have been doing that.
Upcoming projects. First of all, is there a book tour involved with this, or is it probably not? I'm assuming with so many different authors, and how's that working? And what have you got coming up? What are you working on?
Well, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm 8 months pregnant.
I didn't even notice that. You did tell me that on the way in. I had no idea.
So no, there's nothing this is literally one of the last things I'm gonna do before I have a child, because I made a human. So I'm just gonna. And I actually find it really funny when people have been asking me that, and I'm like, you can't even, in this environment, you can't even make a baby and have that be an excuse to take time off. So cross that question off.
I do have a sort of related question. What do you think of people who name children after an athlete?
Oh, okay. So that's a funny thing, because there were baby names on the table that were athlete-related baby names, and my partner was like, no, that's not happening. And I even tried to sneak some in. What
about a middle name?
No, it's a big, and I think that's
so
fair.
Tell me, would you try and sneak in Joe Carter?
No, I can't, because if I do that, then
you'll give it away.
Yeah, so I just.
But this podcast is not being released. Well, for another week, so.
Well, I'm not gonna have. Hopefully, not gonna have maybe in another week. So.
Let's hope not.
Fingers crossed.
Yes.
I will share like I say, I became an uncle this year, and my sister, their family last name is Murad, right? So she just kept hearing Mitch Marner during Toronto Maple Leafs games. So she's like, okay, I got to have MM initials. So that steered, but she didn't, obviously she didn't name her son Mitchell.
It's a bit dangerous to name children after living people. That's a bit. It's like getting a tattoo of a famous person's quote.
Yeah, it could be. I think she's giving us a hint. I get it. Okay.
Wait, so I'm not giving you. There's no hint.
Maybe you were thinking of a deceased legend player that when you were saying you were trying to slip some in there.
No,
Okay.
I'm not.
We're getting silly.
Well,
Anyway.
but the big joke was that I'm an Adam Lind fan.
Oh yeah.
So Eric Green actually said, like, were there variations on Adam Lind, like Lindy and Adam, and that might have been a thing that
Okay. All right.
was a big no at home, but.
So upcoming projects, nothing in the immediate future. But I have to ask you this, which is the $1 million question. How does anyone submit to the next one, and is there going to be a next one?
We don't know. We don't know yet. So get out there, buy the book for everybody on your holiday list who likes sports of any kind, and even people who don't. And then there'll be another one.
Well, I'm going to say, unless Nate has anything to add, I want to say that this week I wanted to start giving hospitality gifts to our guests.
Oh, wow.
And in this case, I wanted to invite you to a Blue Jay game with me and Nate at some point in the future. Would you be willing to come out and watch some baseball with us?
I've actually always wanted to do a podcast from a baseball game. So that is a very fun thing that
We do have a green screen here, but I don't. It wouldn't really. We could project being at the Sky Dome, or it might be called the Sky Dome. And Rogers might sell the team. Who knows?
Yeah.
Oh.
I said Sky Dome. Anyway, I'm sticking with it. Nate, anything you want to add? And if not, is there anything you want to add, Stacey, before we kind of part ways here?
I have such a fondness for the people involved in Best Canadian Sports Writing, the writers. Like, I'm so lucky to be involved in the project and work with such a great roster of writers, and to work with Pasha Malla has been incredible, and you should really buy it, and I can say that because all I wrote was the introduction.
Well, you compiled there's some really amazing work in here, and yes, you should buy it, and we hope you will come and join us again sometime.
I would love that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for coming.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.